Hello everyone, I'm the Mastodon for you today, and welcome to another internet exploration style video. Now today I'm going to deviate slightly from the websites that I've been exploring, and I'm going to more or less explore stuff that you can get from the internet today, with the overall theme being about zip folders. And the two things I'm going to look at today are 42.zip and John the Ripper for essentially trying to gain access into password protected zip folders. So first and foremost, I'm going to start off with 42.zip. Now, what is 42.zip? Well, it is essentially a 43 kilobyte zip folder that you can download online. Now, if you delve into it, what you'll find is that 42.zip consists of 16 zip folders, which if you go into one of them, contains another 16 zip folders, where if you go into another one, it contains another 16 zip folders, another 16, and so on until you get to the point where you go into one of these zip folders and you get a 4.3 gigabyte .dll file, and essentially it's been compressed down massively from 4.3 gigabytes, all the way down to some megabytes, which then gets compressed down, and so you end up with the 43 kilobytes that gives the name 42.zip basically. So if you try to extract all of these files, then you would have a 4.3 gigabyte .dll file multiplied 16 times, because you're in one zip folder that has 16 zip folders containing the same file, multiplied another 16 times, multiplied another 16 times, multiplied another 16 times. You get the idea, to the point where it's along the lines of 4.3 times 16 to the 5. And that's going to be quite a massive number, to be honest. So why not actually, in the source recording, go ahead and pull off such a calculation? So what is editing, right? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so doing the calculation, it comes out to around 4.5 million gigabytes. So to give you some context, that's about 4,500 terabytes, or 4.5 petabytes of size. Now, 4.5 petabytes is actually quite a massive amount of space, and it's almost guaranteed that you aren't going to have that much hard drive space just lying around. You'd have to have hundreds or thousands of terabyte hard drives working in unison, which is going to be very costly and power efficient. It's going to be shit for power, basically. You're not going to be able to power everything sufficiently. So, essentially, if you try to extract 42.zip, your computer's going to fuck up, because you're going to run out of hard drive space, and it's got to extract files somewhere, and it's just not going to do it. And your computer's going to probably blue screen and restart. So this 42.zip is an example of something called a zip bomb. Now, the only reason why I'm covering 42.zip, quite honestly, is because I watched Some Ordinary Gamers do a virus investigations video on it, which I think is actually pretty good, and I would link it in the description below and probably the comments, so watch that because it's a really good video. And essentially what he claims, at least, is way back in the day, antivirus software would extract zip folders to make sure they don't contain viruses, malwares, or whatever. But if you download something like 42.zip, it tries to extract this 4.5 petabytes of information, and it just doesn't do it. You can't do it, and it would just fuck your system up basically and cause a blue screen and a restart. So for shits and giggles, 4.5 petabytes or 4.5 million gigabytes is comparable to about, if I just do the calculation right now, about 331,000 Fortnite installs, according to information I grabbed from my Xbox One. So I would not even be able to tell you what percentage of game installs that would be, but you would essentially have to have 330,000 different consoles of just Fortnite only, and that's it. So it's quite a large amount of space, let's be honest, that we're dealing with here. But thanks to compression, you can squish that all the way down from 4.5 petabytes all the way down to about 42 kilobytes, which is pretty impressive, to be honest, but it's not something that you want to be having on your computer, let's be honest. Something that is just basically a bunch of data that is quite massive in size. So compressing it down is always a good thing. So 42.zip, it's a zip bomb. I would never advise you to download stuff like this. It can mess up your system if you're not careful, so please be careful. However, I do this sort of stuff so you don't have to. Right, now let's move on to something called John the Ripper today. So, what is John the Ripper, you might be asking yourselves? Well, John the Ripper is an example of a password cracking tool. Now, I don't advise you to ever try to crack passwords because that's questionable in terms of legality. However, I'm going to be demonstrating only how to use something called zip2john to essentially try to get a password from a zip folder. Now, in my case, the password for the zip folder is pretty innocent, you know. It's only fuck you 666, so it's a pretty you would say it's a pretty simple password, let's be honest. However, it is a 10-digit password, fuck being 4 letters, you being 3, 666 being another 3, so 10 digits altogether. I'll get into the whole mathematical thing later on in terms of trying to do that for you guys and really tell you about the probabilistic chance you'll have of getting the password fuck you 666. So that I've created a zip folder with some random files in it, and I've moved it into the John folder. Now, there are certain commands that you need to use. First things first, what I would want to do is actually use the command prompt, right? And essentially you just want to change your directories, because something like zip2john.exe or john.exe, it's not like a program that you can just activate and it works. It only really works if you run it through the command prompt. And I'm using a different VM because I couldn't get it to work that well on Linux, on Ubuntu, as the previous 42.zip was on Ubuntu. So first things first, if you get yourself into the John directory, you can run zip2john.exe on your zip folder, and you can create a hash file. And if you actually look into the hash file, you'll see it's just a random assortment of letters, numbers, symbols, or whatever. And it's essentially what is contained within the zip folder. It's kind of like it partially extracts the zip folder, and it tries to essentially get like a key or some level about some information about the encryption. I'm not 100% sure about it, but it does something along those lines, and then you run it through john.exe to essentially try to decrypt the encryption key, essentially to try and guess what the password is. And it goes through some level of iterations, and a number of iterations I'll cover later on. And essentially it is going to be incredibly CPU intensive and time consuming, to the point where it could take weeks or even months to guess a password. So it is some intense stuff, and to be honest, I don't think it really worked that well for me. I had john.exe running for an hour inside my Windows 10 VM, and unfortunately I had zero luck with the password. Considering that the password was 10 characters, it kept guessing shorter, pretty much all shorter passwords than the actual fuck you 666 password. So unfortunately for me, that was something that you have to take into consideration, that, you know, even for something like a 10-digit password, and you might say fuck you 666 is an easy ass password, but, you know, at the end of the day, in a probabilistic point of view, it is actually quite a tough password to crack, because just of the number of combinations that there are and that could exist for such a password. And I might go into the details right now, so I might have to just like edit the audio just so I can actually go through this sort of stuff right now with you guys. So yeah, let me just give you a warning to say that I'm going to get nerdy right now. I'm going to go into some mathematical detail, so if you don't like that, then I would say either skip ahead or stop the video right now, because I'm going to get seriously mathematical with you guys. So here we go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so now let's dig into the mathematical side of something like john.exe. So, first and foremost, I'm going to assume that we are dealing with a binomial distribution. This means essentially that we have a 1 in something chance to guess, say, a letter or a symbol, and it's from a discrete set of data, because stuff like number of characters is a discrete set of data. It's not like, oh, we have an A, but we can transition into a B and transition into a 3. It's not like that. It's just like we have A, B, C, and that's it. So, binomial distribution. So, supposing we have 26 letters of the alphabet, right? All lowercase letters, but we also have the possibility of having 26 letters of the alphabet in all uppercase letters. And we're also going to assume we can have numbers as well from 0 to 9. So that's 26 letters of the alphabet times 2, which gives you 52. And we're adding 10 numbers. So that's in total 62 different characters. Now we are excluding any and all symbols and any sort of foreign letters with accents or Chinese, Japanese kanji letters or anything like that. We're just going to dismiss it for the time being. Well, actually, I'm going to dismiss it entirely, but it's just basically going to make your chances of guessing the password exponentially smaller. So, starting with the first character. What is the probabilistic chance of guessing the first character of a 10-digit password from 62 characters? Well, it is just simply 1 divided by 62, because there's 62 characters, and you have to pick 1. So, it is not quite the 1 divided by 2 chance of guessing the right side that a coin is going to land on. If you flip a coin, for instance, that's, heads or tails, it's a 1 divided by 2 chance. Or picking a card out of a standard deck of 52 playing cards. You have to guess the right number, the right class of cards. So you have to guess the ace of spades, the jack of diamonds, the 3 of clubs. You have to guess the card specifically. And that's like a 1 divided by 52 chance of getting that happen. That right, So, 1 divided by 62 chance is pretty small, let's be honest. So, say for instance that you're embodied by luck and you actually guess the first letter correctly. What's the chances of getting the second number correct or the second symbol correct of your password? Well, that is another 1 divided by 62 chance, because we're going to assume that we cannot lose letters during the process. So it's not like, okay, you picked 1 letter, so that letter's just completely gone and out the question. It's not like the lottery where if you have the number 7 drawn, it's not like, oh, we're going to have another 7, right? In terms of the lottery, it's like, yeah, the 7's gone, so your chances sort of go from like 1 in 42 to then 1 in 41, and like that. But we're going to assume that doesn't happen here. What we're going to say is that, well, we have a 1 divided by 62 chance of getting the first, digit correct. So what about the second one? Well, yeah, it's another 1 divided by 62 chance. However, we have to take into account that stuff like this is a binomial distribution and we have to multiply fractions. So 1 divided by 62, we have to multiply by another 1 divided by 62. And it ends up being a 1 over 3,844 chance. So it's extremely small. So let me just load up Google and I'll actually tell you the sort of chances that we're dealing with something like this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so I've done a little bit of digging around. I can't really find anything that gives the sort of probability that we're dealing with here. But the closest thing I can find is that it's the kind of odds of getting dealt a full house, flush or straight in poker. So that is more likely to happen than guessing 2 digits of your password out of 10 digits. So if you go ahead, you can actually use a formula I'm going to demonstrate on the screen right now, where you can actually suggest what the chances of guessing a password is, basically. So we're going to say it's a 1 divided by 62 chance, but we're going to be raising it to a power, because essentially what we're doing is 1 divided by 62 multiplied by 1 divided by 62 multiplied by 1 divided by 62, and it goes on for the number of digits that you have in your password. And essentially the probabilistic chance of guessing the password correctly, suggesting that we only have lowercase letters, uppercase letters and numbers is 1.19 times 10 to the minus 18. Now that is incredibly small. So essentially the only thing I can tell you that is close to is the probability of rolling snake eyes 10 times in a row on a pair of fair dice. That is 10 to the minus 16. So you have to have a pair of die, or a pair of dice, right? 2 die, and you have to roll it, and you have to get 2 ones, and you just do it 10 times. And that is about 2.74 times 10 to the minus 16. So that is more likely to happen than guessing the password. Now, the one that is more, guessing the password is more likely than the probability of matching 20 numbers for 20 in a game of Keno. I have no idea what the hell that is, but that's 2.83 times 10 to the minus 19. So that is, we're talking about incredibly small numbers here. You have more chance of winning the lottery than guessing this password. And I'm not even exaggerating, because winning the lottery is like 10 to the minus 9's chance of happening. But we're talking about 10 to the minus 18, so it's really, really, really unlikely that you're going to actually guess this password. So, unfortunately, if you introduce the concept of having symbols and, kanji or whatever, or letters with accents on them, then all of a sudden you're talking about increasing the number of symbols and digits and all that you have to use, right? So instead of it being 1 divided by 62, it becomes 1 divided by, 150 or something. And doing this, it's just going to make it incredibly small. We're already talking about 10 to the minus 18. We're talking about it way smaller than that. So, I hope you can understand the fact that trying to guess passwords is going to be incredibly difficult. Now, from 10 numbers, right? And, well, not 10 numbers. We have 10 digits for our password. We have 62 different letters per digit of the password. And if we go ahead and use what I like to call the combinations button on your calculator, then doing 62C10, which is to say that we have 10 digits and we have 62 numbers, so I think that's how it works. We're talking about 1 times 10 to the 11, right? So that's probably about 100 trillion, something, or less than, about 10 billion maybe, or 100 billion or something, I don't know. It's something like that. So if I use that, but with a different outlook on it, then all of a sudden it jumps up to about 3.9 times 10 to the 17. That's doing 62p10. So one thing that we could actually go ahead and do if we're really clever is compare the reciprocal to the actual number. So we got 1.19 times 10 to the minus 18. If we do 1 divided by that number, we get 8.39 times 10 to the 17. And compare that to the 62p10, we get only about 3.9 times 10 to the 17. So essentially all I'm trying to do with saying these are P this and C that is to try and tell you the number of combinations that exist for such a password. Now I think for the combinations button, it is something like you have a set number and it's about how many times you can rearrange that, but then if there's a chance of repeating it, then it doesn't count. And I think by using the P button instead of the C, then that accounts for stuff being able to repeat itself. So either way, we're talking about probably somewhere in the region of about 10 to the 17 combinations. So that is like 1 million combinations. It's there or thereabouts. So it's quite a large number of combinations to be trying to deal with. It might actually be like a quadrillion, like 390 quadrillion combinations, which is quite a lot considering that we only have 62 characters and 10 digits to a password. So if we're talking about, like a really long complicated password with lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, then the chances of guessing the password are incredibly small, and the actual combinations that we're talking about is so extremely large that it is going to take days, weeks, months to guess the password, because you have just so many combinations to deal with. And the fact of the matter is, it took someone on a Intel Core i7 system, fully utilizing that processor, about 6.5 hours to guess a password, which was 8 characters long, and it was test1234. So you kind of see that it is going to take a really long time to crack even the simplest of passwords. So the whole idea of me going into all this mathematical detail and trying to tell you all these sort of numbers, and okay, this has all been an impromptu video, so I apologise if it's all rushed or shit or whatever. But the whole purpose is that something like password cracking is incredibly time consuming, so you just have to keep that in mind, and don't ever do it outside of zip folders. Hell, I don't even know if using it on zip folders is even legal. I'm only doing this for test purposes. I do it so you don't have to. 42.zip has been crazy. You can blue screen your PC with shit like that. And John the Ripper for password cracking is going to take a serious amount of time to actually decrypt everything that you want to. Essentially, it will just get to a point where it guesses the correct password and it tells you got the password, and then you just go ahead and use it and happy days. But of course, if we're talking about trillions upon trillions of different combinations, and you know, positive probability chance is just so low, 1 divided by that, then you're talking a very, very, very small chance of actually getting the password correct. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I've gone on the rails a little bit, shall we say. I've gone all over the place. I've been sitting here for about 26 minutes right now, and of course that has accounted for breaks and all that, so the video is going to be quite long, to be honest. I have ranted and raved about maths and all that sort of bullshit. But let me know if you want me to do more internet exploration style videos in this format, or if you want me to just stick to the websites. I wanted to do this video because I wanted to, but of course it doesn't necessarily mean that you want me to do this sort of stuff. So let me know what you think. I'm 85,000G, and hopefully that you found this video informative or watchable or whatever. So I'm the Master 974, sign off for today. Have a good day and peace out.